And it is 43 minutes past the hour. Welcome back to Sunday Live here at Citizen Television, talking exclusively with the Cabinet Secretary for Environment, Climate Change and Forestry, Soipan Tuya. Madam CS, we were talking earlier on, the President has championed himself as a climate change champion, right? That's how he's positioned himself. Yep. And yet this lifting of the banning, in case people are just joining us, the lifting of the banning, in fact, even though it's in court right now, isn't that sort of a double standard?
Jeff, I will say that the lifting of the ban applies to commercial forest plantations established by law. The plantations we are talking about are provided for under Section 43 of our Forest Management and Coordination Act. And commercial forest plantations in this country date way back to independence times. And they are supposed to serve a purpose, which is to supply the wood market of the country. And as I said, what we need to do with that is to increase efficiency. But now the banning was done because as we were doing this commercial forest plantations, which does not apply at all to our indigenous forests. The trees in our commercial plantations are exotic. They have a shelf life ranging between 15 years up to 30 years. So they are planted purposely with the end game being to produce wood and supply the market. Our indigenous forests, no-go zone. You cannot touch those. And any illegal activity around our indigenous forests, we are taking action on those. The President, being the head of the face of the climate action in the region, is by virtue of the fact that he is the coordinator of the Committee of African Heads of State and Government on Climate Change at the AU. So the summit I'm speaking about in September is actually an AU summit hosted by Kenya. This summit has been in the offing within the AU since 2019, but Kenya fronted itself again with His Excellency President Ruto really coming out as a strong champion for climate action in the region. And the commitment is there. And as I said, we want to redirect and rewrite the narrative of Africa in relation to the climate crisis and projecting Africa as a part of the big solution in the green growth agenda, in the decarbonization agenda. So it is really important for Kenyans to understand, and I don't want to delve into the moratorium issue again because of the court case, but it is important for Kenyans to understand that lifting the ban does not say that you go and invade the forests. It just says that now we are ready to embark on our commercial harvesting of trees in the only 5% of the total gazetted forest in this country. There's
a place not too far from Limuru called Kimende.
Yes.
Where it seems like there's 1 ton destruction of trees. Are you saying those are commercial trees? Is that harvesting?
You see, after the lift of the ban, we allowed for sawmillers to go back into the 5% forests, but only a limited section, not more than 5,000 hectares, to go back. And the people you see in Kimende are sawmillers who are caught up by the 2018 moratorium. They had already been licensed because the management of these 5% commercial plantations is done either through concessions or logging permits to sawmillers or contracts. So we had a lot of sawmillers who had been permitted to do the regular logging, within the only 500,000 per year every year. And therefore, the ones you see in Kimende were the ones who had been allowed since the ban had been lifted. Now they could go back and clear their trees, most of which had rotted away. Some of them were falling because of the lifespan that these exotic trees have. So it is really important that we have things in context. We have people who are doing illegalities in the forest, but then we have this other process, which is a legal process of, sawmillers and Kenyans with, in the timber industry who are given permits and concessions to deal with the limited hectareage of forest.
How do you differentiate between the two? Because, the illegal ones will go in. And
yes, and that is the question. And part of the reason why the ban was done in 2018 is because of a seeming overwhelming of our enforcement officers who are supposed to make sure that we don't have a mix of things where you allow somebody to go and harvest, logs or trees from the commercial plantations, but they take advantage and go right into the no-go zone, which is the indigenous forest parts. And what we have done is that we are enhancing the enforcement capacity of the Kenya Forest Service. We recently just recruited an additional 2,700 rangers. We are in the process of recruiting 600 forest officers. We have just embarked on a process of recruiting young people whom we are calling Green Army, who will all together collectively enhance that enforcement capacity so that it is, we move on the understanding that our indigenous forests are no-go zone and they have never been available for logging. Yeah, and with the enhanced enforcement officers, and we have also begun operations to kick out illegal loggers. We have had to interdict some Kenya Forest Service officers who have been in collusion with illegal loggers in our forest, and those who are doing charcoal burning in the forest. We have done an operation in Sururu Forest. And we have done an operation in, I'm forgetting the name of the forest, including Baringo, forest in Baringo. So that we should not, people should not confuse that, lifting of the ban now means you can go in to do illegal logging. And we will sustain the operation to make sure that we don't have people taking advantage of things. And one of the other big projects that we are implementing through the Kenya Forest Service is a project supported by the French government, which is to increase surveillance of our forests, setting up surveillance facilities. We will have drones, moving and being operated to really ensure that, Kenyans are understanding that, yes, we have the commercial plantations, but our indigenous forests are no-go zones.
Yeah, but don't forget, those are cartels. That's the mafia, and they'll fight back.
The illegal loggers?
Yes.
We are ready for them.
Communities like the Ogiek in the forests.
Yes.
What are you doing about that?
We have a case where the Ogiek community, which you have singled out, have claims to the forest as indigenous communities. We have had cases where those rights are being abused. And having access to the forest by dint of, culture or the history of a community does not allow for people to erect structures in the forests. We have even had to take action on communities that say they have access and they have rights to go into the forest, but they go ahead and lease parts of forest land. So rights come with responsibilities. We are engaging with the Ogiek community because they have this case that was adjudicated upon in the African Court for Human and People's Rights, actually allowing them some form of access to the forest, but it has limits. They can go in and do the beekeeping activities, sustainable activities, but not have people building homes and claiming that they are indigenous communities who are allowed to be in the forest.
Yeah.
Yep.
Madam CS, let me quote, there's a quote here from Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua last October. This is what he said. In the forest, there was a shamba system where people were allowed to grow maize, nurture the trees, and when they grow, they would leave this government, or they would leave. This government is yours, he went on to say. We have issued an order for people to be allowed to farm inside the forests. Again,
it is a question of really encouraging Kenyans, and I know the onus is on me and the ministry to do, to clarify issues and to undertake, proper information dissemination, awareness creation. What that statement is speaking to is a process called Plantation Establishment and Livelihood Improvement Scheme, PELIS. Again, properly situated in our law, the Forest Management Act. It is in the spirit of participatory forest management. We have forest adjacent communities who come in handy to support us through Kenya Forest Service in conservation efforts. They are adjacent to the forest. Some of them are, as you say, the Ogiek communities. And what happens with this PELIS program? Still, again, taking you back to the 5% plantation forest. That is where PELIS is allowed, where there is intercropping between trees and food crops. And it is allowable in law, but only within plantation forest, the 5% of where we plant the exotic trees. So when we do the harvesting of the 5,000 hectares in a year, we have to replant before we move, as we move to the next batch, because I say there's a felling plan, where for it to be sustainable, you cannot go beyond 5,000 hectares. So once we harvest the 5,000, the people you see in Kimende, and I think Kiptunga Forest Station was another clip that was circulating around. Once that felling is complete, then the communities adjacent to that forest area, together with the Kenya Forest Service, there are established guidelines and regulations on how that happens, where then they help us to replant the exotic trees, and we allow for them to intercrop for a period of time. After 3 years, they have to move away and let the trees be. So it is a participatory forest management plan. It does not apply to indigenous forests.
Easier said than done. Finally, Madam CS, there's been major attempts to turn dump sites like Dandora from waste to energy.
Yep.
And build, let's say, power plants. Time after time, there have been companies who have pledged, who have, put in attempts to build power plants. And that's all it's become, just attempts. What happened? Why can't this be a reality?
Yeah, good question, Jeff. Now, that is in the ambit of sustainable waste management. We have a law in this country, Sustainable Waste Management Act of 2021. It's good for Kenyans to know that we have to move. One of the things we have to do is everyone has to deal with their waste from source. And that's what the law speaks to. We are at advanced stages of passing the extended producer responsibility regulations, as well as a number of other regulations that will operationalize the Waste Management Act for us. And that is where we have the Dandoras, the ISOs that we see all over the place. I agree with you. It is time, really, for action. Waste management is a devolved function, but the Ministry of Environment then provides, at the national level, the policy guideline and regulation, meaning we have to work extremely closely with the county governments if this law is to come into place. What we have already done is we have just finalized a prototype law which then is mimicking the National Sustainable Waste Management Law, to be adopted by the various counties. I have had discussions with a number of governors through the COG, the Council of Governors. And Jeff, what we have to start doing is our waste has the potential to turn into energy. Dandora can power Nairobi to a big percentage or degree. This same waste can be turned to wealth in so many aspects. We have our young people who are around these dump sites, rummaging and, you know, getting things out. Yeah. There is an opportunity right there for those young people. And I'm happy to say that we have our PRO organizations, the producer responsibility organizations, really coming up strongly to support government in discussions on how now we turn these waste management plans to reality. But
Dandora, you must admit, Madam CS, it's a cartel dump site. It's filled with cartel boys and men with guns. Sometimes you can't even approach them.
And it is the reason why we must get the bigger picture. Even for those cartels, boys and men, or whatever, girls and women, to know that embarking on, turning around Dandora, sorting the waste, turning it to energy, turning it to whatever else that is of productive use, it does not mean displacement. Maybe the approaches that have been used before is the problem. By not involving those same cartels, I mean, what they want is to acre living from that waste. And right there is an opportunity. So it is a time, and I know I have had a discussion with Governor Sakaja on this. I believe this is the time. There is the political will. And everybody is in agreement that the waste that is choking us, we can turn it to energy, we can turn it to wealth for our young people, for everybody, really. So, as you say, it is a discussion we have. We have investors who are ready to jump in and actualize this. And the intention is there, Jeff, and we are engaging with the county government.
I can't let you go, Madam CS, without asking you a question I'd asked you before the last break about Lake Turkana Wind Power Project.
The Lake Turkana Wind Power Project, although it sits squarely with the Ministry of Energy, but I know it is a highly potent project. It is projected that it can serve up to 1 million households supply of power. And it is in the whole conglomerate of our renewable energy, environment currently, where we stand at 92%. We are supplying our grid with renewable energy at 92%. That is the wind, the solar, the hydro, and geothermal. And we are pushing that to 100%. And again, that is in line with our we are party to the Paris Agreement. We have made what we call the nationally determined contribution to the global fight against carbonization or greenhouse gas emissions, and we have committed to move to 100% by 2030. And I know the wind might be one of the least developed currently, but with that move where we want to go to 100%, wind is definitely at the core of it. And again, the discussions we are having at the Climate Summit is to invite capital and technology to Africa so that we can exploit the likes of Loyangalani to its full potential.
And that again, that climate change conference is next month?
Next month.
In Nairobi?
Between the 4th and 6th of September at the KICC. We have overwhelming response from the globe over. We are going to have not only African presidents here, but global leaders from across the world. We recently opened up our formal registration process. We were projecting that we would have 10,000 people here in Nairobi, but as of yesterday, we have 10,000 registered already. So it's going to be a floodgate. But most importantly, we want to come up with tangible solutions and proposals that will be carried on to the UN General Assembly so that we can be real about this climate action. And if the world is real, and it has to be, then Africa is the place to come and invest with the potential to decarbonize everybody. And that then must include the discussion about how do we re-engineer, how do we restructure our international financing instruments to respond to that opportunity that lies in Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
CS Soipan Tuya, you have a huge responsibility. Huh? You have 3 dockets in one.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know this already. But environment, climate change, forestry. Tough job.
They are standalone ministries.
Yeah. And you're doing 3 jobs. Yes. Did you get paid 3 times?
No.
Oh, okay.
But I'm happy serving Kenyans.
Oh,
yeah.
Look at that.
I am happy.
All right.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
Keep doing your stuff.
Yeah.
We have lots of feedback. Oh, by the way, there's a bit of feedback. Let's read the feedback before we let you go. Princess Ndubi says, kindly ask the CS why the government has allowed exportation of baobab trees to the US. Is biodiversity conservation part of the agenda?
Mm-hmm. The baobabs really has caused a big debate. So this baobab story is a subject of trade in genetic resources. Kenya is a signatory to the Convention on Biodiversity CBD. And there is a protocol that goes with that. So that is the international instrument that regulates or guides trade in genetic resources, like the baobab trees.
Which means that we can sell them, we can export them?
But there is a due process that has to be followed. This, Jeff, was one of the immediate tasks I had to deal with when I got into office last year. Because I came in and there was all these pictures of huge baobab trees, 8 of them that had been uprooted. Correct. For export to Georgia. Yep. For establishment of a botanical garden. On the face of it, by dint of being party to this biodiversity convention that deals with the trade in genetic resources, it is, and even the commercial forestry, we are talking about exotic trees. Kenya is exporting trees from other countries. So this is one of those genetic resource, international trade in genetic resources. I have had discussions, and of course, because they are trees, the heat comes on me. Mm-hmm. But these trees are, the particular ones in Kilifi County, are in private farms to begin with. So those are community forests. The county government of Kilifi has some responsibility to do with this trade. The KEFIS has to issue phytosanitary certificates for that to happen. NEMA, Kenya Forest Service. So it's a multi-agency kind of an approach to it. And the discussion we should be having, again, because there's a court case on these baobabs, so I'll not delve into the details of that, but the discussion we should be having, because the baobab tree, and this is the first of a kind that is happening, where we have uprooting of baobabs to be taken outside of the country. Yeah. And I like the debate that Kenyans have started, because we need to think about it. When you look at the benefits of the baobab tree, they are huge. You know, the cultural, the medicinal, yeah, the water, you know, the animal feed and all that. And therefore, when you see it being uprooted for establishment of a botanical garden, that tells you what the value it carries. And we may need to have discussions on whether we want to allow for this to happen, or we could classify our baobabs under the same classification that sandalwood is. If I catch you with sandalwood, Jeff, it's a straight crime.
I go to jail. Yes,
because it's a protected species. It is under the Convention on International Trade on Endangered Species. So if we closed our baobabs in that space, then we would not have trade. The trade would be strictly regulated.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is Kipto. This Kipto says, good that the Environment Ministry has these tree-growing plans and focusing on its coordination mandate. The CS claims that Africa's forests are the world's largest carbon sink, but it's actually the ocean. What are they doing about marine protection?
Yeah, at the core of our tree-growing strategy, and I wish I had more time to open it up, is our mangroves, for example. They are touted as the highest in carbon sinking. So we have, we have to really put a heavy emphasis on restoring our degraded mangrove areas in the coast. So there is a truth to it, yeah. and of course the whole ocean space is a carbon sinking ecosystem. So we have to look at it globally, not just the forests.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tanushmar says, kids in grade 5 are being taught how to plant trees. We are in the right track to achieve the 30% tree cover. Yep. 30%. Yeah, in our lifetime.
If we inculcate the value system in our children, and that's the import of me and my colleague from the education, really pushing to institutionalize this tree growing in our schools. If it becomes part of our life, a value system, Jeff, we will make Mother Earth happy. And we will...
She'll be smiling.
Yeah.
Engineer Lazaro says, government should stop issuing conflict statements. We can't lead the world in calling for environmental conservation and at the same time allow degradation of forests through massive logging. Double-edged sword. It's a
I agree. I mean, illegal logging.
Yeah, illegal.
Has to stop.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No.
Madam CS, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. All the very best. See you next month at the conference.
Sure.
All right.
Karibu.
Cabinet Secretary for Environment, Climate Change, Forestry, Soipan Tuya, speaking to us exclusively here about climate change, forestry, logging, etc., etc., etc. We're going to take a break, shall we? Yes, let's take a break. Come back. Plenty more ahead. Meantime, coming up.